Major Hurricane Milton continues to rapidly strengthen in the Gulf of Mexico after going from this area of just disturbed weather to a major hurricane that's going to bear down on Florida in the coming days. In this video, I've got the no-crap approach with all the latest details on intensity, storm surge and track, plus the inland rainfall. Let's get right into it. Timestamps are in the description if you want to skip ahead to a specific part of the video, but I want to go ahead and get right into this with the latest National Hurricane Center guidance as of our 4 p.m. Central Time, 5 p.m. Eastern Time advisory on our Monday evening, as well as the latest satellite imagery as the day closes out. And this is your visible satellite image. What a perfect eye in that storm. That indicates some intense strength. This is a compact storm, but it is packing a big punch with 180 mile per hour sustained winds, 220 mile per hour gusts. This is well into Category 5 thresholds here in the South Central Gulf, and it is going to come very close to the northern tip of the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico as it continues on that eastward track in the next 12 hours. Eventually, we're going to begin to see this curve a little bit more towards the northeast as the Hurricane Center guidance is showing on screen. And in the latest advisory, they are indicating that this could very well maintain its intensity at least through our Tuesday afternoon. This is as we go to around 2 p.m. Tuesday. Still looking at a 175 mile per hour Category 5 monster being projected there in the South Central Gulf as it kind of makes its way to the northwest of Cuba. As we go into our early morning hours of our Wednesday, just about 24 hours out from when landfall is expected in the west central coast of Florida, the Hurricane Center projecting that this could still very well be a Category 5 hurricane with winds upwards of 155 to 160 miles per hour. Eventually, we do see this weaken down a little bit more, and I'll show you why that is likely and explain that a little bit more in detail in a minute. But overall, the Hurricane Center projecting that by the time we go into our Wednesday afternoon, we're seeing this weaken down to Cat 4 strength, barely sinking down into our very early morning hours of Thursday around the landfall time frame to Category 3 status, still a major hurricane being projected to come literally right into Tampa Bay, a very dangerous hurricane moving in from the west to the east, and this could bring some significant storm surge that looks worse with every update that comes out. I'll show you that storm surge projection as well a little bit later in the video. Again, Tampa to Orlando, it's looking like the track is going to go somewhere right along through those areas. But keep in mind that this cone still includes Jacksonville, Florida, and goes as far south as Cape Coral. So if you live anywhere in these red shaded areas, you could see the center of the storm go right over you, and the impacts will spread outward from the cone as well. We'll eventually see this storm go back out over the Atlantic waters where it's actually forecast to weaken more as opposed to re-strengthening. This is because of the same front that's actually going to help weaken it a little bit before it makes its way to the west coast Florida landfall. Now I want to discuss what different alerts mean for you before we even take a look at where alerts are issued right now. For tropical storm watches and warnings, this means that there is that possibility or likelihood of 39 to 73 mile per hour winds on the way for sustained winds in your community if you're under it. A watch is issued for tropical storm conditions about 48 hours out from conditions. Tropical storm warnings are issued about 36 hours out from those conditions beginning. Keep in mind that track shifts from the cone of uncertainty I was just showing you a minute ago can put you into something like this, which is a hurricane alert. This includes the possibility or likelihood of 74 plus mile per hour sustained winds. Watches for hurricanes are issued about 48 hours out from the conditions, just like a tropical storm. Hurricane warnings typically are issued about 36 hours out from those conditions, but can be a little bit less notice if the track shifts. Read warning updates for what is expected in your community. Now we're taking a look at those actual watches and warnings now that you know what they mean. A hurricane warning is in the red on screen right now, so if you live from Williston to Ocala, down to around Homosassa Springs, Spring Hill, Tampa, Bradenton, Inglewood, Cape Coral, Arcadia, Sebring, Bartow, Kissimmee, as well as Orlando, you are also under a hurricane warning as of the 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Central Time, Monday evening update from the Hurricane Center. I don't know why that says that it expires in 7 hours and 49 minutes. It expires at some point on Thursday, but just be prepared. The hurricane warning is already in effect because within 36 hours from when I'm filming this video, we could see those hurricane conditions begin. And then, of course, we're going to see those conditions fill into other areas where we have such as a hurricane watch. That includes areas from around Jacksonville, Florida, down the Space Coast through Fruit Cove, St. Augustine, we've got Palm Coast, Daytona Beach, Deltona kind of on that dividing line of the hurricane warning and hurricane watch, but I'm sure you'll end up in the hurricane warning there too. Down to Palm Bay, we also have a hurricane watch in effect. And again, just because it's a watch now does not mean it will not become a warning later. In fact, that is the likely scenario if you're already under that watch. So be prepared because you have actually a little bit more time if you're in the watch areas. Meanwhile, let's talk about some of the tropical storm impacts. Tropical storm warnings are already issued up here into the Big Bend of Florida, curling from Apalachicola around towards the Big Bend region, and then down here to Key West as well as Naples, Florida. We have tropical storm warnings there. So the northern and southern ends of our hurricane warnings are where we have the tropical storm warnings. and the northern and southern ends of our hurricane watches are where we have our tropical storm watches, up here in the southern Georgia and southern South Carolina coasts, and then down there in southeast Florida, including West Palm Beach as well as Miami. That is where we have our tropical storm watches. About 48 hours out, or a little bit less, that is when our tropical storm conditions could begin, if they do begin in these areas. Now I want to spend a solid minute or two discussing the storm surge risk with this system. If you are under a storm surge alert, this is warning you for life-threatening saltwater inundation coming from the coast. This will include areas isolated by nearby inundation as well, getting warned. Storm surge tends to affect areas closest to the coast, so this does not include inland flood alerts. Watches will come out 48 hours prior, warnings 36 hours prior to the storm, and in this case, we already have storm surge warnings up from around the Homosassa Springs area and Spring Hill, down through Tampa Bay, Bradenton, Inglewood, and as far south as the far southwestern tip of the Florida Peninsula. This does not include the Keys, but pretty much all of the western part of the Florida Peninsula is under a storm surge alert right now, because at least 3 feet is expected from the Big Bend all the way down there to that far southwestern shore. But in areas in between, especially there towards Tampa Bay, this is where we could see storm surge upwards of not only 5 to 10 feet, but also upwards of 12 to 15 feet right there inundating Tampa Bay. This is already a low area, a flood-prone area from the sea. Please, especially from Yankeetown down to Bonita Beach, be prepared for life-threatening storm surge inundation, even pushing blocks away from the ocean, and this is going to come right in line with where this track is going. Notice what these GEFS ensemble members, or kind of a collection of models being put into spaghetti plots here, are showing. You can see exactly that they are bringing this storm right into Tampa Bay, just like the National Hurricane Center cone does. If anything, we could see the storm's center lean a little bit further north from the general track line, though. We'll have to keep a close eye on that. Now let's take a look at what the models have to say in terms of the intensity of this storm upon landfall. First of all, notice in the near term, the storm is expected to remain a Category 5 through at least Tuesday night. However, the models do begin decreasing the intensity of the storm, and that is because it's going to run into some atmospheric winds that are blowing very strong with the jet stream. It seems that this storm is going to have a very hard time Wednesday avoiding some of those upper level winds, and thankfully this should bring it down to at least a Category 4. I don't think we're going to be seeing a Category 5 landfalling in Florida, and most models have it going down to at least a Category 3 before making it into Tampa Bay, so that's some good news there. Still though, all the forecasts I just showed you with surge and such, they are accounting for the fact that this is going to weaken. So if the storm stays a little bit stronger, the impacts are actually going to be worse than in the graphics I've shown you. So definitely be prepared, and be over-prepared if anything. Listen to your local officials also if you need to evacuate there in Florida. Here we go, playing out the HAFS-A model here. I think it does a great job of showing exactly how the wind field is going to go, or at least similarly to how the wind field is going to go as we go through the next few days with Milton. Going into our Wednesday morning, I pause it here. You can see the wind field expanding already a little bit. Windstorms begin to try and weaken like it's probably going to do on Wednesday. They do actually tend to expand their wind field a bit. So even though the wind field might be a little weaker, it's definitely going to be a little bit more broad in terms of the impacts by the time it makes its way to Tampa Bay. And a lot of the gusty winds could fill the entirety of the Florida Peninsula once it comes on shore. Nonetheless, not much going on here on the Florida Peninsula, at least through mid-morning Wednesday. The far west coast might already begin to see some 30, 40 mile per hour wind gusts, but nothing too intense is expected through most of the daylight hours Wednesday. It's once we get out of the Wednesday midday time frame and into the Wednesday late day time frame when things begin to go downhill for a lot of the state. While most of the Florida Peninsula continues with at least some low-end tropical storm conditions, we're probably going to begin to see more parts of the western and central parts of the peninsula, like Tampa Bay, fill in with medium to high-end tropical storm gusts. The center of this storm will begin to get more disorganized, but we're going to see a messier eye wall as a result, with hurricane-force gusts of Cat 1, Cat 2 strength getting very darn close to that western Florida coast and expanding quickly here in the east central Gulf. This is Wednesday, 3, 4, 5 p.m., and again, we're probably still looking at the center of the storm having some Cat 3 plus winds around it. The weakening trend does continue on this model, though, as it makes its way up towards landfall. I don't want to disregard the fact that this is probably going to be down to a Cat 3 upon its landfall based on guidance from the models, based on guidance from the Hurricane Center. That's still as early as Wednesday, just before we get to our midnight time frame into our early Thursday. That still brings some 60, 70 mile per hour gusts to a lot of the western and northwestern part of the peninsula coast. Look at this, going into our Thursday, 2 to 5 a.m., we'll probably see a landfall around that time frame. Gusts 80, 90, 100 miles per hour pushing through Tampa. pushing through areas on the northern and southern side of the bay. We'll also see at least some 60 to 70 mile per hour wind gusts as far north as Jacksonville, maybe even some hurricane sustained winds there now and then. The same will go for Orlando. That is why all these areas are in hurricane warnings. If you're under that hurricane warning, you have the chance to have sustained winds blowing at least 74 miles an hour. You can see some of those gusts well above that in some parts of Jacksonville, Florida, still wrapping around on the northwest side of the storm as it pulls out in Tampa into the Thursday mid-morning time frame. By Thursday afternoon, things will begin to calm down as this makes its way off to the east and quickly races out into the Atlantic. Here is my custom Florida wind impact map that I have made for Milton. If you're in the yellow shaded areas, you are looking at least some strong gusty winds that could be briefly around tropical storm force at times. That does include southern Georgia and southern parts of South Carolina through most of Florida. And then we're also looking down there into the Miami, Florida region. We're going to be watching that. In the orange shaded areas, including places like Jacksonville, Florida, and then down towards Naples, intense winds are very likely. Consistent tropical storm force winds can be expected with this storm into late Wednesday heading into our Thursday. Hurricane conditions are in the red from Tampa Bay to Orlando, heading very darn close to Jacksonville. We are going to be looking at that red shaded area there. I think we could definitely see some consistent Cat 1 to Cat 2 winds moving through this region as the storm pushes on through. Also, as the storm pushes on through, I don't want to disregard the rain threat, not just the surge, the saltwater surge, but also the freshwater threat that we have here from the downpours. We're looking at 4 to 6 inches of rain being anticipated at the minimum in all of the areas shaded in yellow here on this graphic. Just on the north side of the center, though, that's probably where we're going to see some of the messiest rainfall, in addition to those hurricane force winds. So from Tampa Bay to Orlando, up to Jacksonville, and in any point in between, we're looking at a widespread swath of probably 6 to 10 inches of rain, with locally higher amounts being expected from the storm. With that combined with our hurricane conditions, we could definitely see plenty of toppled trees, plenty of damage to buildings, and turn around, don't drown if you get into any flood water conditions. The tornado risk map for Milton looks like so. I've made this graphic as well. Overall, it is looking spotty as far north as Jacksonville. The best chance for isolated tornadoes is going to go from Orlando southbound to Miami. This will begin through the day Wednesday and then last into at least early to mid-morning on Thursday. That is just me giving you information in a 12-minute window. The most important thing you can do to get your most accurate information, the most detailed information, listen to your local officials. Go online and figure out your evacuation route if you have not already and you think that you want to evacuate or you are being told to evacuate. Make sure that you are listening to those people of higher authority. That is the most important thing you can do in this situation. Don't listen to anybody who is trying to give you false information. If you think information is false, make sure you're looking that up. Of course, if you do trust my channel here, I would love it if you'd consider hitting that subscribe button so that you get more consistent, accurate, and educational forecast videos in the future. I'll catch everyone in the next update, which I intend to be tomorrow, about this major hurricane.